Hello, everyone, and welcome back to When Julian Speaks. And this is the Heart to Heart and Money, our weekly space where we have honest conversations about love, relationships, healing, self-worth, and emotional experiences many people quietly carry in their hearts. So if you're new here, welcome. And let me remind you that When Julian Speaks is a voice podcast only. So wherever you're listening from today, whether you're driving, walking, relaxing at home, or simply needing a quiet voice to sit with you for a while, thank you for being here, and you don't need to get your eyes glued on the screen. So let me just remind you, if you're new here, that this podcast is dedicated for the real conversations about love, heartbreak, healing, growth, and the lessons life teaches us throughout our relationships. So I think this is a place where we speak honestly, no perfect answers, no unrealistic expectations, just real conversations about experiences that shapes us. So today's Heart to Heart Monday episode is called Why Closure Doesn't Always Come from the Other Person. And if you're actually ever replayed a conversation in your head 100 times, and if you ever wished that one final explanation, if you ever wondered why some left, changed, disappear, or stopped choosing you, then this episode is for you. And because closure is one of the most misunderstood parts of healing, many people spend years waiting for it, waiting for answers, the apologies, the explanation, the accountability, or even waiting for a conversation that may never happen. And sometimes that waiting keeps the wound open far longer than necessary, So today let's talk about why closure doesn't always come from the other person and what healing looks like when it doesn't. As we go along on our first segment, it's called the closure that we imagine. So when most people think about closure, they imagine a conversation, right? Like a final meeting, like an honest explanation, a sincere apology, a moment where everything suddenly makes sense. Maybe you imagined it before. You sit down with the person who hurt you. They explain everything. They take responsibility. They acknowledge your pain. They answer every question you've been carrying. And somehow, after that conversation, you'll finally feel at peace. It's understandable why we want that, but who would not? Right? The problem is that life rarely works that neatly. Sometimes the person who hurts us doesn't understand the damage they caused. Sometimes they understand it, but they avoid accountability. Sometimes they moved on so quick. Sometimes they simply don't have the emotional maturity to provide you the answers that we're hoping for. And sometimes the conversations we desperately wanted never happens at all. For our next segment is called The Pain of Unanswered Question. It is painful. It's something that you will have to carry. And one of the most hardest things about heartbreak is uncertainty. I always believed I've been there, Human beings naturally seek understanding, We want reasons, we want explanations, we want answers. Why did they change? Why did they stop trying? Why did they leave? Why wasn't I enough? Why did they make promises they could not keep? And the mind hates unfinished stories. That's why we replay events repeatedly. We analyze conversations. We search for clues. We're trying to complete a story that feels unfinished. And the challenge is some stories never provide all the answers we want. right? It's waiting forever, the wait forever for missing pieces that keep us trapped. Let me just share you something. Let's talk about Rachel. Rachel was in a relationship for 3 years. Things weren't perfect, but she believed they were building a future together. They talked about plans, they talked about dreams, they talked about what came next. And then one day, everything changed. The relationship ended. The explanations were vague, and the answers felt incomplete. And Rachel spent years asking herself what happened. She replayed every conversation, analyzed every memory, and questioned every decision. She thought if she could just understand why, she could finally move on. But eventually, she realized something. The search for answers had become more painful than the absence of them. The relationship had ended. But mentally, she was still living inside it. It began when her healing truly began. And not when she receives the answers. When she stopped believing she needed them in order to heal. So, everyone, this is very difficult to hear. Sometimes closure is the behavior, But sometimes the closure we're seeking is already in front of us. Sometimes the way someone treated us is the answer. It's on their action. Their silence is the answer. Their lack of support, their lack of effort, their inconsistency, their decision to leave is the answer. And it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. Of course it hurts. So much. But when people spend years searching for deeper explanations while overlooking what has been or what has already been revealed through actions communicate, sometimes more clearly than words ever could. While you're listening with me, let's just pause for a moment. Think about a situation you've struggled to let go of. Maybe it's relationship, maybe it's friendship, maybe it's someone you never got the chance to fully understand. And now ask yourself, what answer am I still waiting for? And what do I believe that answers will give me? Will it give me peace? Validation? Understanding? Permission to move forward? Because sometimes the things we're truly seeking isn't information. It's permission. Permission to let go. Permission to stop carrying the story, to move forward. And perhaps that's permission we can give ourselves. What if the apology never comes? Many people wait for apologies, and that's understandable. When we've been heard, accountability matters. Being acknowledged matters. Being understood matters. But unfortunately, not everyone apologizes. Some people avoid responsibility. They avoid rewriting the history. Some people convince themselves they did nothing wrong. And some people simply don't have the emotional capacity to offer meaningful accountability. And if your healing depends entirely on receiving an apology from someone unwilling to give one, your healing remains in their hands. That is a very difficult position to be in, because it means someone else's choice continue affecting your peace. Right? So healing Real healing for me, it often begins when we stop waiting for other to provide what they never are willing to offer. You know? But why do we actually romanticize final conversations anyway? Because I think many of us imagine that the one final conversation would change everything. That if we could just say the right words, ask the right question, receive the right answers, then we'd finally be free or get the relationship back. But often those conversations don't provide what we expect. Sometimes they create more confusion. Sometimes they reopen wounds. Sometimes they reveal things we weren't prepared to hear. And sometimes they simply confirm what we already knew. You know, and the reality is that healing usually doesn't happen in a single conversation. Healing happens through repeated choices. The choice to accept reality, the choice to stop revisiting old wounds, and the choice to focus on your future instead of remaining trapped in your past. I want to share something about Mark. So let's talk about Mark. So Mark spent 2 years hoping his former partner would eventually explain why things ended. He checked social media, revisited the old messages, imagined the future conversations. He believed closure was waiting somewhere. Eventually, he attended a friend's wedding. While sitting there, he watched people celebrating life, love, friendship, and new beginnings, and something occurred to him. While he was waiting for closure, life was continuing. Opportunities were continuing. Relationships were continuing. His future was continuing. But he was still emotionally parked in a chapter that had already ended. And that realization changed everything, not overnight, but gradually. He stopped chasing answers. He started investing energy into his own life. So Mark see the light, you know? But for me, acceptance is not approval for you to move forward. And this is important. Acceptance does not mean what happened was okay. It does not mean that you agree with how you were treated. It doesn't mean that you stop feeling hurt, you know? And acceptance doesn't simply means it should be recognizing reality. The relationship ended. The conversation may never happen. The apology may never arrive. And the explanation may or may never come. And while the reality may be painful, you know, resisting it often creates additional suffering. Acceptance allows us to work with reality rather than constantly fighting it. But what are the closures that we create ourselves? You know, what if closure isn't something we received? What if something we create? What if closure is deciding what or that your future deserves more attention than your past? You know, what if it's accepting that some questions will remain unanswered? What if closure is choosing peace over endless analysis? Or what if it is trusting that understanding every detail is not required for healing? These are difficult shifts, but they are often necessary ones, because healing requires movement. And the movement becomes very difficult when we're constantly waiting for someone else to give us permission to begin. So maybe you're listening today and there is someone you're still carrying, someone you still think about, someone you still have an unanswered question about, someone whose absence still hurts. If that's you, I want you to know that you're not alone. And many people have stood exactly where you are. Many people have wished for answers. Many people have waited for conversations that never happened. The pain is real. The disappointment is real. But so is your ability to heal. All right? And even without every answer, even without every explanation, or even without every apology, your healing remains possible. So everyone, if you're listening right now, before we finish the episode, I'd like to leave you another questions or few questions. What answer are you still waiting for? What do you believe that answer would change? Has waiting for closure helped your feeling or your healing, or it delayed it? What would happen if you gave yourself permission to move forward today? And perhaps the most important question, what part of your life deserves your attention now? Because your future still needs you. Your future deserves you fully present. Closure is often portrayed as something another person gives us. But life doesn't always work that way. Sometimes the answer never comes. Sometimes apology never arrives. Sometimes story remains unfinished. And yet healing remains possible. Not because the pain disappears, but because we gradually learn to carry it differently. We learn that peace doesn't always come from understanding everything. Sometimes the peace comes from accepting that we won't and continuing forward anyway. Everyone and you who have been listening until the end, thank you very much for joining me for another Heart to Heart Monday here in When Jillian Speaks. I do hope today's conversation reminded you that your healing does not have to wait for someone else's apology, explanation, or permission. Your healing belongs to you. And while closure from others can be helpful, it is always not necessary. If today's episode resonated with you, please consider sharing it with someone who you think may need to hear this as well. Everyone can listen on When Jillian Speaks on YouTube, Spotify, and Amazon Music. And just to remind you, if you want to share your own story, we do that every Friday. Our anonymous story submission forms can be found through our Facebook page. And if you'd like to support the podcast as well, please do check out or grab a copy of my book that are available on Amazon.com and through our website at whenjillianspeaks.com.au. And the book is called The Space I Never Gave Myself. And definitely there's another one coming in very, very soon. And it will definitely help you out healing and providing you self-love. All right, so once again, thank you very much for spending part of your day with me. As I always say, take care of your heart, be patient with your healing, and remember, sometimes the chapter ends without all the answers, but your story continues anyway. This is Jillian, and you've been listening to When Jillian Speaks. I'll talk to you in the next Heart to Heart Monday.